Good morning. In order to give you a slightly African experience, I'm going to start my speech 45 minutes late, because that's what happens in Africa. So here we go. Good morning. I am here to talk to you today about a journey I took for 15 years on the beautiful continent of Africa. Now you'll probably ask, why does a young man from Belgium move all the way to Africa? Well, this is what happened. When I was slightly older than you are now, I graduated from university, and this was still during the days of the Cold War in Europe. All young Belgian males were supposed to do compulsory national service. I was young, I was Belgian, and I was male, so I was also supposed to go to the army. Now, if you see what our army looked like in those days, you will agree with me that there must have been more interesting things to do with my time. So I agreed with myself and said, let's go and discover a different part of the world. So in 1989, I left the beautiful Belgian chocolates and the terrible Belgian weather, and I moved down to the southern part of Africa, to a small country called Swaziland. Now, some of you may not have heard of Swaziland, so I'll speak about this country for a few minutes. Swaziland is one of the most beautiful countries in the southern part of Africa. Very unknown, because most travelers go straight to South Africa, to Kruger Park, to Cape Town. What they don't realize is that they bypass a very scenic and a very traditional society in Swaziland. I hope you can see it on the right side of the slide. Swaziland is, besides the fact that I went there to teach at the United World College, I went to teach languages there, I also wanted to get involved in the local communities. And I thought there's no better way to do that than through sports. It's where we're all the same. The size of the field is the same for everybody, no matter what color or size we are. So on my second day in Swaziland, I was invited to play in a charity football tournament, which was shown live on television. The next day I received a phone call from a parent of two of my students. He says, would you like to join one of the local clubs? I thought, yeah, why not? Probably a good idea to do that. So the next day he showed up, he came to collect me in his Mercedes, and he took me to a training field where I met youngsters like myself, 20, 21 years old, and we started to play football. Now, what this man had not told me was that, in fact, he had taken me to a club called Manzini Wanderers, which was the club owned by the king of Swaziland. What he hadn't told me either was that his youngest daughter had recently married the king and become his third wife. By the way, today the king of Swaziland has 14 wives. Now, Swaziland is the kind of place where every village, every town has a church and a football field. Actually, maybe not a church, but certainly a football field. Wherever you look, youngsters are kicking footballs in the dust. Now, as you can see in the slide, the footballs are not always what you would expect from a football around here. They are made of plastic bags. You find trees in the middle of the fields. You find cows grazing in the fields, etc., but it doesn't matter. For many of the African children, football is not just the favorite pastime, it's also the only one. And I'm going to talk a little bit now about the other side of football in Africa, because I saw it from not as a spectator, but as a player and as a coach. So here we go. This is King Mswati of Swaziland, who was the patron of the club that I started to play for. And I was taken to the Somhlolo National Stadium just to get a taste of Swazi football, because I really knew nothing about it. And one of the great things there is that there's only one stadium in the whole country. So what happens on a Sunday afternoon is all the big clubs play in the one stadium. Imagine going to Wembley Stadium in London and watching Manchester United versus Chelsea, and then followed by Manchester City versus Arsenal, all the same afternoon with the fans of the four clubs in the different corners of the stadium. An amazing experience, of course. And in terms of the people that came there, it's a party. It's a big, big party. The whole Sunday, people are there dancing, blowing their vuvuzelas. It's all good humored. Of course, there's drinking going on, and there's a bit of banter, etc. But I was amazed, and I thought, I really want to be part of this. I think this is the way in which I can discover the other side of life here in Swaziland. So I joined the club, and very soon, I started to train with my new team. Now, this is what the training field looked like. It was not Wembley. It was very dusty, very basic, and I immediately saw that things here aren't what I was used to in Belgium, because I played a lot of football in Belgium too. It was very different, and I immediately understood why these African players were so skilled. If you have to play on a field like this, you better be skilled. You learn how to control that spherical object. Now, around the field, we had very high grass, dry grass. Sometimes the grass was even taller than myself. And whenever the ball disappeared into that grass, none of the players went to retrieve the ball. What they did was they looked for some small boys that were watching our training and said, hey, boy, go and get the ball. And the boy would disappear into the grass. And I asked them one time, I said, why don't you guys go and fetch the ball? Or why can't I fetch the ball? I said, no. This is the forbidden zone. I said, the forbidden zone? What do you mean? Well, this is what they meant. In that grass, on the training field, we had black mambas. Now, they're not great in encouraging you to go and fetch a ball. Most of the boys that retrieved our balls did come back with them. But this was just one aspect. You know, who would think that on the side of your football field there would be snakes hovering around? One of the biggest discoveries for me was certainly the witchcraft. The witchcraft was fascinating because it's not just ingrained in football in Swaziland, it's also in every other aspect of life. It's to do with relationships. If things don't go too well at work, you can threaten your boss with some witchcraft stories, etc. And people really do believe in them. You must be careful. If you go to societies where these things are real beliefs, you must also respect that. And I learned that very quickly. I had to negotiate with my team leaders because there were certain practices that I did not agree with. Now, I wanted to respect the culture, but I didn't want to harm myself. So we did come to an understanding that I would accept to do those things that didn't affect my body. I would never drink anything, eat anything, or cut myself with razor blades and things like that. Some of the practices were rather difficult to accept. That did come with a challenge, though, because now it's Sunday afternoon, we play our game, and we win. Why did we win? Because the witchcraft was good. We lose. Why do we lose? Because the white guy didn't do the witchcraft stuff. So there was a constant dilemma I had to negotiate, but to their credit, they did accept my stance on witchcraft. At the same time, I never, ever ridiculed it. I always said, I respect what you do. Please just respect the fact that I cannot take the substances that you are taking. I'm just not used to them. The other aspect that I got to know was camp, what we called camp. So we have a game on Sunday afternoon. By Saturday evening, we would get together either in my house, because I had the biggest house of all the players, or if we had an away game, we would go maybe to a resort and have a good time there. But camp was really to keep us all together and to make sure that everybody fell in line, that none of the players spent the night either boozing or looking at the ladies in the local areas. It did give me, however, the chance to get to know my teammates very, very well. Now, I want to talk about one of them in particular. Our goalkeeper, whose name was Tamsanka Kwale, was a national disco dancing champion. And I found that out in the camp, because one moment, it was one evening we were in the camp after dinner, and one of our players put on music by a local group called Likoko. And by the way, the Siswati language has clicks, as you can notice. This goalkeeper started to dance. I thought, wow, this guy is really good. And then I found out that, in fact, recently he had competed in a dance competition in South Africa and won. And he'd won a substantial amount of money. So I spoke with Tamsanka about this, and he said, oh, this is my lobola. And I said, what is lobola? And he said, oh, lobola is the cows that we pay to the parents of our girlfriend when we marry her. I said, oh, tell me more. So bridal price, tell me more. And so it turned out that in Swazi culture, if the man wants to marry his girlfriend, two families get together and they negotiate a price for the girl. This is to show appreciation to the parents of the girl who have raised her, who have taken all the expenses. So when you marry a local lady, you're supposed to pay cows for her. And I thought that was such a cool practice that I did exactly the same thing. I found myself a Swazi girlfriend, I got two families together, and I paid 27 cows for my wife, who is still my wife to this day. Isn't that cool? So, the football was great. I'll give you 10 minutes now to try and spot me in this photo. I assume you don't need 10 minutes for that. The football was great, and it really did show me the other side of life in Africa. Because what I saw in the club, I also saw in real life. It was really a transfer between those two. As I was working at the United World College of Southern Africa, I also had direct access to some of the great personalities of that time and that place. For instance, in the photo on the right, you see me with Archbishop Desmond Tutu, whose grandchildren were students at the school where I taught, where I also coached the football team, and my striker was actually the grandson of Mr. Nelson Mandela himself, whom I also got to meet after he was released from prison. This is in the early 90s. I then moved, after 6 years in Swaziland, I then moved to East Africa, to Tanzania. Now, Tanzania, the same thing happened. Of course, Tanzania is known for its beauty, Mount Kilimanjaro, the Serengeti Plains, the Zanzibar Islands, Ngorongoro Crater, etc. But my interest was really in teaching, which was my job, but also in playing football and coaching football. And very soon again, I joined the biggest club in the country called Simba Sports Club. Now, Simba Sports Club is located in Dar es Salaam, where the city of 3 million people, and being the only white guy in the whole team, in fact, in the whole Premier League, really got me again involved in the local society. The club was based in a place called Kariako. As you can see in the photos here, Kariako is a bustling African neighborhood. And I spent a lot of time there running the club, playing for the club, coaching the club. It was a club without leadership, really. There were lots of issues with corruption, with people going to jail, etc. So I took over the whole club and immersed myself from day one. And it really got me to experience life in Tanzania, to learn the local language, Swahili. I'm going to flick a little bit fast through these slides because time is going really fast and there's a lot I need to go through. So here I am now coaching Simba Sports Club. Again, does anybody need a lot of time to find me? I wouldn't think so. This is a club with a continental reputation. This club has played finals of African championships, etc. So a real big club. I found it essential in order to understand the culture, to immerse myself in the culture, to learn the local language, which is Swahili. And all of you know a little bit because you've all watched The Lion King and you all know the song Hakuna Matata, which means no problem. We were also the only club with an official team bus, which you see in the photo here. That was for short distances. Any distance shorter than 200 kilometers, we were in that car. Now, the concept of mwalimu, I think, is interesting to all of you because as I was a school teacher there, and school teacher in Swahili is mwalimu. I soon found out that on the football field, when I was coaching my team, they also called me mwalimu. And I thought, that's odd, because in Europe, we have teachers and we have coaches. There, everyone is mwalimu. And to go even further, even the father of the nation, Mr. Julius Kambarage Nyerere, is called mwalimu. This concept of mwalimu really applies to anybody who can guide, anybody who can direct, anybody who can add to the learning of younger people. So I thought that was really interesting to be put on the same level as the founding president of Tanzania. And very interesting to look at a coach, a football coach, as a teacher also. We did a lot of recruitment of young players, and I started to develop an interest in the youth, because the one thing I noticed in Tanzania was there were no opportunities for young players. I understand South Island School has a football team. Schools in Tanzania don't have football teams. People can't afford to spend time on football teams. So I thought, if the future of Tanzania football wants to be assured, wants to be guaranteed, let's look at the youngsters. So I started to develop some younger teams. I started actually a football academy in Tanzania. Looking for money was very difficult, but we came up with some raffles at the end of training sessions where 2,000, 3,000 people were watching the training sessions. We collected money through raffles. And at some point, I was then able to start my own youth football academy called Wakati Ujao, which means the future. We were successful. As a football team, we got to travel to many places. This was our transport to Zimbabwe, a 3-day journey in a ramshackle bus to Zimbabwe. Not just us, but also all the food we needed, because you don't want to depend on the hospitality of the enemy team in order to get fed. When we got to Zimbabwe, I thought we are going to be put up in the Intercontinental Hotel or in the Sheraton Hotel, but in fact we were put in the Pink Flamingo guest house, where all night long there was a wedding party. And I'm sure it was put on to keep us awake, to stop us from sleeping the night before the game. However, we did win 3-1 away. And the Zimbabwean team very smartly decided not to come to Tanzania for the return match. They said, give us the fine, it costs less than the transport to Tanzania. So that's how African football works, and that's the kind of decisions people have to make there. What's the least expensive penalty that I can take? So back to the Youth Football Academy. It started off very well. it wasn't just teaching youngsters to play football. I was teaching at an IB school, and many of my senior students needed CAS hours, and I'm sure you're all familiar with CAS hours. So I got some of my students to teach English, to teach mathematics to the boys. I brought in some doctors to come and talk about healthy lifestyle, to talk about the diseases that are going around Africa. In those days, AIDS, HIV was very prominent. So we wanted to make sure that our boys understood the challenges of growing up. We also took them to the beach to do environmental cleanups and things like that, just to try and develop the person, not just a footballer, but the person as a whole, the holistic person. Okay, 9 years in Tanzania. Ended with the establishment of a football academy, which is still up and running today. But then I also wanted to move on in my professional coaching life, so I was given the chance to go and coach professionally in Qatar. Now, one of the perks of that was that I could actually take some of the promising youngsters from Tanzania with me to Qatar and put them in a sports academy over there. So this opened up some new opportunities for some of these young children from Tanzania, which I thought was great. Now that I'm in Hong Kong, I haven't stopped looking for new opportunities, and in fact now I'm starting to work with the Football Association of North Korea to try and do the same thing, to try and develop the youngsters there and see how football can maybe change a few lives in that country that's also full of challenges, as you know. In terms of personal growth, football is a great divider, or a great leveler, if you like, in terms of meeting some interesting people. It's not what I did it for, but it was one of the perks of the role that I found myself in. I did meet the head of state, Mr. King Mswati III of Swaziland, who is still I consider him a friend. As you know, my wife is from Swaziland, so whenever I go back, I can visit His Majesty and just catch up on old times. I also got to meet a few other people that you may recognize. This is just showing off, really. But here, the footballer in this photo has worked on in 5 different countries, in 3 different continents rather, has won matches, has drawn matches, has lost matches, and has won prizes. And on the left-hand side, there's David Beckham, who has done exactly the same thing. He has the looks that I don't have. He has the bank account that I don't have. But I just hope for David Beckham that he has had 10% of the experience in football that I have had. I don't envy him for that. So, to wrap it all up, the other side of Africa, as seen through football, is a fantastic way. I feel really privileged to have seen and to have done what I saw and what I did, because the human aspect, the people that I met, the challenges that I saw, and the experience that I have gained over those 15 years in Africa, nobody could have given me that through books, through videos, or through stories. I'm glad to have experienced, and I wish you all the best. Thank you so much.